Jim Willis, Marcellus Drilling News.
Marcellus Drilling News. Thank you for joining us here today. And I noticed a couple stories. I read a couple stories at your website, and I wanted to bring you on to talk about that today. And one of them had to do with the pipelines, whether it be critical infrastructure, and a second one had to do with a company, and the name escapes me. I want to say it's Cruise or Crusoe. That's why I bring in you, the expert, to talk about it. But they're like powering computers or something like that. So I thought that was kind of nifty. But what's happening out there in the Marcellus world these days?
Well, thanks for having me on, Jason. Like everyone, I suppose, we're living through this coronavirus crisis in lockdown, and it's when I talk about it to my friends and family, inevitably, I try to put my head around this. It's just so strange to me that our world has, in my opinion, has fundamentally changed in the past 2 weeks. It changed to the point that I think we're going to be living in a different world on the other side of this. And,
I couldn't agree more. By the way, I couldn't agree more.
And just to finish that thought is, we're humans, and it's been my observation that we don't like change. We don't deal with change very well, and so it takes a while for us to sort of warm up to it. So what I see, or what I think, is that I hear comments about, gee, it's just all so surreal. Everything's shut down, and no one's going, at least here in New York State, where I live. And I think that's because it takes humans a while to acclimate and get used to this like new world that we're living in. So it's very strange. And of course, as it applies to the energy space, we are going through unprecedented times. Of course, you hear that word unprecedented like every other word when you watch television news, listen to your local politicians. It's always unprecedented. Well, in the energy space, it truly is unprecedented. And I'm sure you're aware of this, Jason, but we're experiencing, at least on the oil side of things, and I write more about the gas side of things, but of course the two are joined at the hip, and many of the companies that do oil drilling also do gas drilling. So I'm very interested in it, and we're experiencing a double shock. We're experiencing a supply shock and a demand shock at the same time. It started with the demand shock, right? The coronavirus created this situation where all of a sudden people aren't traveling, they're not doing as much. All the airline traffic is shut down, cruise ships, and all these. So there's far less demand for oil, like 2, 3, 4 million barrels a day less demand than there was just a few weeks ago. And at the same time, the Russians and the Saudis got into a snit and began a pumping war, a price war, to drive the price of oil down, and so they've started to pump more, and so now they're pumping an extra however many millions of gallons or millions of barrels per day, several at least. And so now you not only have a situation where the market at equilibrium had decreased its demand, but now you've flooded it with even extra supply, and so the price is crashing, and it's not tenable. I shared an article today of Barclays. There was an analyst at Barclays that's now predicting that if this virus goes on for a certain period of time, you might see oil at $10 a barrel. And that's just, that's unthinkable, in my opinion. So we're going through unprecedented times, that's for sure.
The one thing, you mentioned about some of the behaviors and some of the things about humans and attitudes. I don't think you said attitudes, you said behaviors, but I've said that on this show the last couple of weeks that, really when you look at humans with the evolution and how humans change, it's more through behaviors than it is adding another limb or growing wings or something like that. When you look at evolution, humans more evolve through behavior. And I look at and then if you go a step further, if you want to get extremely deep here, as long as we're down in the rabbit hole, is that, really it takes about 3 weeks to change a behavior. That's, as far as if you do something for quit smoking, for example, if you can make it for 3 weeks, then you probably have licked the habit. And 3 weeks is generally what most psychologists and also doctors say. And so when you look at what this coronavirus is going to do, it is going to change our behavior. It's going to change it just out of sheer, people are going to be locked down for, Vegas, 30 days. And so that's 3 weeks. And the energy industry, the one thing, though, that is a bright spot is that the energy industry, I believe, is getting highlighted throughout this in terms of its need. Now, whether it's being highlighted by the media is a different story. Whether it's being highlighted by the politicians is a different story. But when you look at everything from the masks to making sure that those respirators are working and the hospital grids are getting enough power to make sure it happens, to the delivery drivers driving the things across country, I kind of think there should be a little more attention being focused towards the energy impact on making this coronavirus fight operate. What do you think about that comment?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I try to call attention to it. I know others that are sort of in our space that produce content in the energy area are trying to call attention to that. You're absolutely right. Not enough attention is called to it on the national scene because it's just there, and it's always just been there, and it's because it works well. It's a well-oiled machine, pun intended, and so people don't think of it, until they don't have it, and that's when they think about it. I mean, you could look at the example that springs to mind for me is I think it was last year. Maybe it was 2018. I'm trying to think when it was. Yeah, maybe it was 2018. In Massachusetts, about 25 miles from Boston, there was a situation with Columbia Gas, their owned by NiSource, where the pipeline system in the local utility, the LDC, in the area was doing some work on their pipelines. They were putting in some new pipelines, replacing some things, and so they were abandoning a section of an old pipeline. And won't go into all the details, but what happened was they didn't realize that there was a sensor in the old pipeline that was still active and live, and so when they shut that pipeline off, the sensor said, "Uh-oh, there's no gas in here," so pump more, and it told the system to keep pumping, and it supercharged the rest of the system, and it started to blow out the pipelines and cause explosions all over the place in this community. And in that entire community, I think there were, I want to say 6,000 people, something like that. They ended up being without natural gas for something like 3 months, and as wintertime was approaching. So this is like the fall of 2018. And so you have this dichotomy. You have Massachusetts, and you have the politicians in Massachusetts that absolutely prohibit any new pipelines. They don't want it. They want to get off from natural gas, and they make all these noises about it. But hey, when it's cut, people start screaming. So I think it's a testament to this industry that it sits in the background and it works. The entire supply chain, it just works, and it works very, very well, and to great credit, to the people that are involved.
Well, and here I was trying to lob you a nice little softball so that you could plug your own website, but I know how you don't like to plug your own website, so I'm going to, because the example I'd like to give is one that I got aware of it from marcellusdrilling.com, which is your website, and it has to do with is it the Mariner East pipeline? Is that the one?
Yeah, that's right. Yep,
So
Mariner East.
and the conversation is that whether it's critical or not or essential, and the governor Wolf wants to shut down the construction on it. And I thought the debate was over, that pipelines were deemed critical infrastructure. And talk to me a little bit about what's going on there with the pipelines being essential, and the governor and all that stuff, because I found that very interesting.
Yeah, it's and I found it interesting too, because I thought the same thing. But the situation, as I talk to you today, the very latest is it's still confusing. I'm not sure that it's been totally sorted out yet. So in Pennsylvania, as in New York, the governor has essentially shut down all what are called non-life sustaining businesses. So people don't go to work; they stay home. If they can work from home, that's great. If they can't, they're whatever, either on unemployment or, the companies out of the goodness of their hearts are still paying them, whatever. But there are certain key activities, of course, that still have to go on. People still have to go into work and do those things. So oil and gas as an industry, the upstream part of it, is on the critical list, on the life-sustaining list, and so that work continues. So wells are still being drilled, and and all of that. Of course, utilities are a critical industry, that are delivering gas and electric to homes and things like that. Now, the Mariner East pipeline system, it's actually 3 pipelines. There's an old one that was converted, Mariner East 1. There's 2, and then there's another one called 2X. All 3 of them flow NGLs from southwestern Pennsylvania and eastern Ohio, where the drilling that goes on in the Marcellus and Utica in that region it turns up a lot of NGLs, a lot of ethane, but there's also propane and butane, and the other NGLs. And so that pipeline system was put into place, or was being built, to go from eastern Ohio, but basically western Pennsylvania, all the way across the state to Philadelphia on the eastern side of the state, and where it sits on the Delaware River. And a lot of those NGLs are actually exported to other countries. So Mariner East 1, an old, smaller pipeline, it's been up and running, continues to be up and running. Mariner East 2 is mostly done, but in order to get it completed and operating, they had to sort of jury rig a few spots where they were having troubles. So and unfortunately, it's in the greater Philadelphia area, sort of out in the suburbs. And when they were drilling, they would, create sinkholes and, all sorts of issues, right? So they borrowed an existing pipeline in the area, and they sort of routed it across there. So there's still a little bit of work left to be done on 2, but 2 is up and running because of this jury rigging. 2X is another pipeline laid right next to 2. A second pipeline, and that one is still under construction. So there was initially some confusion about, okay, the governor has given this order, all non-life sustaining businesses must shut down, and that includes construction of new roads and things like that. And so, of course, the antis jumped right on that. Well, construction of this pipeline has to stop, obviously. And yet construction continued after the governor's deadline last week. And so that raised some issues. Well, at first it appeared that it continued because you can't just not go back, and you can't just quit working, right? You have a trench dug someplace, and if you just leave it there and it rains, and you get erosion and the water goes up, you have to do things to tidy it up and sort of make it okay so that it can rest, it can sit there. So that was the initial reaction was, well, yeah, we are shutting it down, this construction on the new pipeline. And so I came to the conclusion and wrote about, well, it appears to me that if a pipeline is already up and running and it's delivering product, that is a critical item. That's a life-sustaining business, and it has to keep going. But if it's a new pipeline that's not yet in service, that's on the non-life-sustaining, the non-critical list, and can be shut down. Construction on it. So there's a sort of a subtle difference there in what's happening in the midstream, as far as I can see. But then today, there was another article that came out that was discussing in Energy Transfer, the builder of that pipeline. Released a statement saying that they've received confirmation that they can continue to monitor and maintain, I'm going to read it, the rights-of-way and work sites associated with their construction projects in Pennsylvania, including Mariner East 2. In addition, we may secure, stabilize, and move equipment at these sites under the enhanced safety measures from the governor implemented on March 19th. We're in the process of resuming these activities while adhering to the protocols, safe, social distancing and all that business. So what does that mean? I don't know.
I love this first paragraph, by the way. I'm looking at it too. I'm looking at it from, I don't even know the website. It looks like, anyway, it's a news site, but it says Energy Transfer says it is complying with Governor Tom Wolf's order to shut down construction of the Mariner East pipeline project, while also applying for waivers to continue some work in the interest of safety. So are they still working? Are they not? What's going on here? Are they going to work while they apply for waivers, or are they going to shut down and wait for the waivers to come in?
My best guess is this, Jason, is that they now have the waivers, and the construction, quote unquote, or the work that's happening is to essentially shut it down, get it to a point where they can leave it alone for a period of time. I mean, that's my best guess. But then you have organizations like Food and Water Watch, which I absolutely detest. And they release a statement that says construction on Mariner East 2 pipeline is in no way an essential activity, and Sunoco must send workers home with compensation in order to protect them and their families. Of course, they hate these workers, right? They call them losers. To protect them and their families and halt the spread of coronavirus. While Sunoco argues that suspension of construction increases risks to safety and or the environment, we know it's the other way around. Pipeline construction is simply too dangerous to allow during this period of heightened caution and uncertainty. It's just BS. Look, what Sunoco or which is also Energy Transfer, same company, what they're saying is we've got to make these sites safe. We have to fill in certain trenches. We have to, push the dirt in certain ways, so it's not going to erode and cause even more issues, right? That's what they're saying, that they want to make it safe, and yet Food and Water Watch, they just, I guess, want them to walk away from those sites and leave them unsafe. I don't know.
Well, you brought up a great point, by the way. There's a certain amount of, whether you want to call it prep work or what, but it's like de-prep work. I mean, you've got to cover those sites for safety, for erosion factors, rain.
Of course.
All those examples you gave make total sense. And what, you're just supposed to stop and yeah, like just leave the shovels behind and everything? No, it shouldn't be. I mean, I know a lot of people were, just making sure they didn't get within a certain amount of distance of people and that sort of thing. And trying not to make light of it and trying to understand the severity behind it and et cetera. But at the same time, there is a certain level of operations that still can be done. They still can be done on a relatively lifeline basis. And these pipelines are interesting, just in my neck of the woods, there was still construction as of yesterday on a lot of big projects, a lot of buildings. You know, like I don't know why we need $2 million condos still, but those constructions were still going on. Yeah, they told all the bars and restaurants to close, but $2 million condos were still being built. You know, I mean, it's at some point somebody's got to stand up and say, okay, guys, let's stop doing this here and figure this out. Anyway, so let's get back to the industry here for a second, because, you know, you mentioned the 1-2 punch, and, you know, it was hard to find some bright spots for a little while, but you found one with that. I chuckled because here I'm on naturalgasnow.org and you're on there. I didn't even know you're a guest correspondent for Tom Shepstone. And then it's about...
Yeah, Tom picks up some of my stories periodically and sort of broadcasts them in his channel, and I'm more than happy to have him do that. You know, I love Tom. I mean, he's a great guy. So.
It's good cross promotion and everything else, but I chuckled because here I got the Marcellus Drilling news guy with the other Marcellus guy out there covering natural gas, informing me about a company in the Bakken, my home turf, that's apparently trying to solve the flaring issues by powering computers.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, I said in my post that I did on this that, you know, technically this isn't a Marcellus Utica story, and I try to keep my stories pretty much, you know, on course with what's happening in our neck of the woods here. But you know, this is a crisis, and we're all in it together, as we often hear. And the industry is all in it together too. So I wanted to highlight the good work being done by this company, Crusoe Energy Systems, and what they're doing to contribute to the crisis, to help solve the crisis. So Crusoe is a company that manufactures portable units that go to well sites, oil well sites, where, you know, typically at a well site, and you know this problem, I'm sure you've talked about it plenty, you have, when you drill for oil, you also get natural gas, and what do you do with the gas? Well, either you vent it or you flare it, and of course there are steep penalties for doing either of those, and it's bad for the environment, et cetera, et cetera. And so you try to run a pipeline to those locations, and you might have to wait years to get a pipeline to those locations, which means you can't produce any oil because you're producing gas, and you have to do something with the gas. So in order to solve that problem at remote locations, this company has, Crusoe Energy Systems, put together a portable electric power plant, if you will. So they'll take that gas at the oil well site that's coming out, and they'll burn that gas, and it will produce electricity. And they'll use that electricity to power computers. And it's a distributed computing network kind of a thing. They have little, you know, satellite dishes that connect to computer networks, and what they do is they offer up this computing power at these remote locations, all networked together to chug along and work on problems, you know, resolving problems of various kinds. They, you know, lease out this computing power, if you will. And in this case, they're offering up and have offered up the use of their computers for the people that are working on a vaccine for the COVID-19 coronavirus. And I just think that, you know, that deserves a hat tip and a big thank you that someone in our industry has stepped up like that. And in North Dakota, of course, is, you know, the Bakken is one of the places where they have these systems. And so, you know, those distributed sites in the Bakken, you guys are helping to solve the COVID-19 coronavirus issue.
Like I said, I was really surprised about that. In fact, while we were talking, I noticed that the Williston Herald has done a story now. And you know how it goes. Once a blogger or a news site picks it up, usually within 3-4 days, you know, other people do it. You know, we were talking earlier off the air. It's amazing how many press releases, you know, that people get. And I know I get about 100 a day. And you got to weed through them, and then of course when you go do a Google News search, half of those news stories are press releases. So then you got to weed through those. And so there are a lot of news outlets out there, that they do look to people like yourself, people like me, people like Tom Shepstone, who have been journalists and news people for, 15, 20, 30 years, that when they have a guest on or they have a blog or a news story, boy, you can see the just the ripple effect of the news story go. You know what I mean by that?
Oh yeah.
And I think you guys actually started this story because I'm looking. The Williston Herald just picked it up 17 hours ago. They did it. So
right.
We've been trying to get this interview for over a few weeks. So this is something.
Right.
Anyway, go ahead.
I was going to say I ran it on Monday, so.
Well, there you go. Monday
on
and
my
then
site. So yeah, so I've often said, sort of tongue in cheek, you can read it on Marcellus Drilling News Today, or you can wait a week and read it somewhere else.
And there's a lot of truth behind that. I got a kick out of this. I put out a letter that I turned into a JPEG on LinkedIn. And within 24 hours, I counted 17 people that basically took the image, saved it onto their hard drive, and then put it on theirs. Because as far as I know, I'm the only person that did that. Because it was, well, most people comes in a PDF or something. Like, I actually took the time. I thought, this would be good eye-catching. Then you see everybody pirate it, and I'm just like, wow, that's crazy. Yep. Copyright laws, they don't exist anymore. Big deal. So
Not
I guess
really. Yep.
my mistake, I should have definitely watermarked it, I guess. But anyway, sticking in the world of flaring, you're out in the Marcellus where there's, gas, that sort of thing. Are you seeing anything new in the terms of innovation in the world of flaring, at least, before the last couple of weeks of the the COVID-19 shutdown happened? Were you seeing any good advancements in the innovation world like this Crusoe Energy Services?
Well, when I'm studying this stuff, I typically see it more in other plays. In the Marcellus and the Utica, what we're drilling for is gas. And in your neck of the woods, it's a waste product. It's something you got to get rid of. Out here, it's the thing that we try to sell. And so there's always a little bit of there's still a little bit of flaring here and there, but boy, it doesn't happen very often in our neck of the woods. We're trying to capture every last molecule that we can in order to sell it. So it's with the development of more pipelines out here over the past few years.